My pregnant sister-in-law was living with us rent-free, but while we were out, she threw away all the food in our fridge. When I confronted her about it, she called me fat, so I kicked her out. For the past 2 months, my 22-year-old sister-in-law, Lisa, had been living with us rent-free. She had just graduated and moved to our city with dreams of becoming a model. I mean, she had the look, tall, slim, with long brown hair that always looked like it belonged in a shampoo ad. But all those plans came to a halt after she found out she was pregnant, just 6 months into a whirlwind romance. Her boyfriend, Jake, was barely getting by himself. He still lived with his parents and couldn't support her. So Lisa turned to us. When my in-laws called, they tried to play it like it was a temporary arrangement, just until she found a job or some kind of stability. My husband, Dave, and I talked it over. We figured we'd help her out, at least for a few months, given how hard it must be to face pregnancy with no clear plan. I remembered Lisa as the sweet, shy girl who'd sit quietly at family gatherings. She was always kind to our son, too, so I thought, why not? I told myself I was doing a good deed. But the person who arrived at our doorstep was nothing like the Lisa I remembered. From the moment she stepped inside, it was like a switch had flipped. Instead of gratitude, Lisa's attitude was demanding and cold. She barely acknowledged our 6-year-old son, Alex, who had eagerly been waiting to show her his new toy car. Instead, she rolled her eyes when he tried to get her attention, muttering something about needing to rest. I brushed off her behavior, chalking it up to fatigue from the move and the pregnancy. But things didn't improve. In fact, they got worse. She complained about everything, from the lack of organic food in our fridge to how outdated the guest room was. One day, she even had the audacity to criticize the scent of our laundry detergent, saying it made her feel nauseous. "I'm pregnant, not dead," she snapped, as if that excused her bluntness. The first major clash happened during dinner one evening. I had cooked pasta, a regular weeknight meal for us. As I set the food down, Lisa stared at it, then looked up with a frown. "You don't have any gluten-free options?" she asked. I was taken aback. She hadn't mentioned any dietary restrictions before. "I can make something else," I offered, trying to keep the peace. But she just scoffed, pushing the plate away. "No wonder everyone's getting fat around here," she muttered under her breath, glancing at me in a way that made my face burn. Dave tried to stay neutral, reminding me that pregnancy can be tough. "Just be patient," he'd say. "She's stressed." But it wasn't just the rude comments. It was her complete lack of respect for our household. I'd come home to find dirty dishes piled up, shoes thrown across the hallway, and snacks half-eaten and left out on the coffee table. I started to feel more like her maid than her sister-in-law. Lisa never offered to help around the house. Instead, she lounged on the couch, scrolling through her phone or talking loudly on video calls. The turning point came one morning when I noticed Lisa's stuff taking over the entire guest room and slowly spilling into other parts of the house. She had her modeling magazine stacked on our dining table, piles of makeup scattered across the bathroom sink, and her clothes mixed in with ours in the laundry room. It wasn't just physical space she was taking over. She had also invaded our routine. She'd wake up late, leaving Alex to tiptoe around in the mornings. She'd demand the TV for herself, claiming she needed it for research, and often snapped at our son for making noise. One afternoon, as I was picking up yet another pair of her shoes left lying around, I felt my patience slipping away. I decided to have a talk with her, hoping it would clear the air. "Lisa," I started gently, "I know things have been tough, but it's important that we all pitch in. Maybe you could help with chores, or let me know if you need specific groceries." She barely looked up from her phone. "I'm pregnant, remember?" she replied, as if that were a get-out-of-everything-free card. I shouldn't be doing anything strenuous. I tried to explain that doing small things around the house wouldn't be too much for her, but she cut me off with a sarcastic, "You try carrying a baby and see how much energy you have left." This wasn't the Lisa I had agreed to take in. This was someone who seemed entitled, as if the world owed her comfort just because she was pregnant. And the worst part? I began to sense that my husband was feeling the strain, too, though he tried to hide it. When I'd vent my frustrations to him, he'd just sigh heavily, rubbing his temples. "Let's just ride it out," he'd say. But deep down, I knew something had to give. At that moment, I realized this temporary arrangement was anything but temporary. Lisa's stay was turning our home into a battleground, and I was stuck between wanting to help and needing my own peace back. Little did I know, this was only the beginning. Last week, my husband, Dave, our son, Alex, and I went to a cousin's wedding a couple of hours away. It was a nice break from the chaos at home. We even decided to stay overnight to avoid the long drive back in the dark. For the first time in weeks, I felt a tiny bit of relief. I could laugh, dance, and not worry about Lisa's constant demands. But, as it turned out, that brief escape would cost us more than we expected. We got back home around noon the next day. I was exhausted, but ready to settle back into the routine. I stepped into the kitchen, put my purse down, and instinctively opened the fridge to grab a snack for Alex. But instead of seeing shelves filled with groceries, I was greeted with nothing. The fridge was completely empty. No milk, no eggs, no vegetables, no leftovers. Not even the condiments survived. I blinked, thinking maybe I was still tired from the trip, but no, it was real. I felt my heart start to race as I looked around the kitchen, noticing the garbage bags piled near the back door, all filled to the brim. At that moment, Dave walked in, carrying our suitcases. He paused when he saw the look on my face. "What's wrong?" he asked, frowning. I just pointed at the fridge, unable to form words. He peered inside, then looked back at me with the same shocked expression. "Where's all the food?" I didn't have an answer, so I marched upstairs to find Lisa, feeling my anger bubble to the surface. I found her lounging in the guest room, scrolling through Instagram like she didn't have a care in the world. "Lisa, where's all the food from the fridge?" I asked, trying hard to keep my voice steady. She didn't even bother, looking up. "Oh, that?" "I threw it all out," she replied casually, as if she'd just emptied the trash. I felt my jaw drop. "What? You threw it out? Why would you do that?" Lisa finally glanced at me, a slight smirk playing on her lips. "I needed to start a special pregnancy diet," she explained. "My new agent said I need to maintain a certain look, even while pregnant. And your food wasn't exactly part of that plan." She said it so nonchalantly, like she had done me a favor by clearing out weeks' worth of groceries. I felt a mix of disbelief and rage. This wasn't just inconvenient. It was a blatant disregard for our money, our effort, and our home. I tried to hold it together, but I could feel my voice trembling. "Lisa, that was our food. Do you have any idea how much that cost us? You can't just throw away everything we have in the house for some diet." Her response was nothing short of infuriating. "Relax," she said, almost laughing. "You're overreacting. Honestly, you could probably benefit from this diet too. Maybe lose a few pounds." I felt a hot wave of anger rush over me. I was beyond words at that point. Here she was criticizing my weight after throwing out everything we had stocked up to feed our family, all for some unrealistic modeling aspiration. Dave, who had followed me upstairs, finally spoke up, his voice firm. "That was too far, Lisa. You had no right to touch our food, let alone throw it all out." But Lisa just rolled her eyes, muttering something under her breath about how no one gets it and that she's the one making sacrifices to give her baby a better future. I felt something snap inside me. I was done tiptoeing around her, done trying to be patient or understanding. "This isn't working, Lisa," I said bluntly. "If you can't respect our home, you can't stay here." She looked genuinely surprised, as if she never expected me to actually confront her. "Are you serious? You're going to kick out a pregnant woman?" she asked, her voice suddenly softer, almost playing the victim. But I wasn't buying it anymore. "I'm serious," I said, my voice unwavering. "This isn't about you being pregnant. It's about you crossing every boundary we have. We welcomed you into our home, and you've done nothing but make things worse." The reality of what I had just said sank in, and for a moment, I felt a twinge of guilt. But I also felt an overwhelming sense of relief. It was as if all the frustration I'd been bottling up had finally found an outlet. Lisa's face twisted, a mix of anger and desperation. "Fine," she spat, grabbing her phone and storming past me. "I'll call Jake. You'll regret this." As she slammed the door behind her, I was left standing there, unsure if I should feel victorious or just exhausted. Back downstairs, I turned to Dave. He was silent, staring off into the distance. "Did I go too far?" I asked hesitantly. He shook his head slowly. "No, you didn't." She crossed a line, but I could tell he was conflicted. It wasn't easy for him to see his sister being kicked out, but even he had reached his limit. Meanwhile, Alex had been sitting on the couch, confused by all the commotion. "Mommy, why are you mad?" he asked innocently, holding on to his stuffed dinosaur. I knelt down and hugged him tightly. "It's okay, sweetie," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Sometimes grown-ups just have arguments. But deep down, I knew this was more than just an argument. It was the beginning of something bigger, something that would change our family dynamics for good. I had reached my breaking point. The empty fridge incident was the last straw in a series of unbearable events. I was tired of making excuses for Lisa, tired of trying to rationalize her disrespectful behavior. I marched back up to her room, fueled by anger and adrenaline, determined to put an end to this nightmare. "Lisa, pack your bags," I said bluntly as I entered the guest room. She was lying on the bed, headphones in, scrolling on her phone as if nothing had happened. Her only response was a slow, deliberate roll of the eyes. "Seriously? Over some groceries?" she asked with a mocking tone. I could feel the rage bubbling over. "This isn't just about the groceries, Lisa," I shouted, my voice echoing down the hallway. "It's about the total lack of respect you've shown us since the day you moved in. We've tried to help, but you've done nothing but make things harder. You need to leave." At first, she just stared at me, seemingly in disbelief. But then, her expression quickly shifted to one of exaggerated hurt. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she started sobbing, the kind of dramatic crying that seemed more performative than genuine. "You can't just kick me out," she wailed. "I'm pregnant. Where am I supposed to go?" Her sudden shift from indifference to desperation caught me off guard for a moment, but I knew I couldn't back down now. "You've had plenty of chances, Lisa," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "We've tried talking, we've tried accommodating you, but you've taken advantage of our kindness. This can't go on." Lisa's crying grew louder, almost as if she were trying to draw Dave into the conflict. Sure enough, he appeared at the doorway, his face a mix of confusion and exhaustion. "What's going on?" he asked, clearly overwhelmed. I turned to him, my frustration palpable. "I'm asking Lisa to leave. She's thrown away our food, insulted us, and refuses to take any responsibility for her behavior." "I can't do this anymore, Dave." Dave stood there looking torn. I could see the weariness in his eyes. The toll these past 2 months had taken on him too. For a moment, he seemed unsure of what to say. But then, to my surprise, he didn't try to stop me. He didn't jump to Lisa's defense like I half expected him to. Instead, he simply sighed deeply, rubbing his forehead as if the weight of the situation was too much to process. "Lisa, maybe it's best if you leave," he finally said, his voice low but firm. The look on Lisa's face was a mix of shock and betrayal. She started to sob harder, trying a different angle. "I thought you were my family," she cried, directing the guilt trip at both of us. "How can you do this to me? To your own niece or nephew?" Meanwhile, Alex, who had been sitting on the living room floor playing with his toys, looked up with wide eyes. "Mommy, why is Auntie Lisa crying?" he asked, his innocent voice cutting through the tension. I felt a pang of guilt, but I knew I couldn't let her use her pregnancy as a shield for her behavior anymore. Lisa, however, wasn't done. She sat on the bed, refusing to move. "You're heartless," she spat, her voice dripping with anger now. "Kicking out a pregnant woman? What kind of people are you?" But I wasn't backing down. I went straight to her closet and started packing her things, clothes, shoes, makeup, all of it. I tossed them into a suitcase without bothering to fold anything. "I'll help you pack," I said, my voice firm and unwavering. "You have until tonight to leave." At that point, Lisa seemed to realize that I wasn't bluffing. Her crying became more frantic, and she tried to hold on to some of her things as I packed them, but I kept going. Dave just stood there, silent but supportive in his own way, watching me reclaim our home. With every piece of clothing I threw into the suitcase, I felt a mix of anger, relief, and sadness. This wasn't how I wanted things to end, but it felt necessary. I dragged the suitcases out of the room, down the stairs, and out the front door, setting them on the porch. Lisa followed behind, still crying, still trying to appeal to my sympathy. "You don't understand," she pleaded. "I don't have anywhere else to go." But I was past the point of caring. "Then you'll have to call Jake," I said bluntly. "We've done more than enough, and we can't do this anymore." She stood there, shivering slightly in the cool evening air, her face a mix of fury and desperation. "You'll regret this," she muttered through her tears. "You'll regret treating me like this." I closed the door behind me, my heart pounding. Inside, Alex was still looking confused, sensing the tension even if he didn't fully understand it. I bent down and hugged him tightly, whispering, "It's okay, sweetie. Sometimes grown-ups have to make tough decisions." I felt a strange combination of emotions, guilt, yes, but also a deep sense of liberation. For the first time in months, I felt like I had taken control of my own home again. But I knew the aftermath of this decision was going to be messy, and Lisa's tearful threats echoed in my mind long after the door had closed. An hour after I had thrown Lisa's things out, her boyfriend, Jake, showed up. I heard the rumble of his old car before I saw it pulling up to our driveway. I watched through the living room window as he stepped out, his face looking as tired and defeated as Lisa's. He shuffled to the porch, taking in the sight of the suitcases strewn across it, and glanced around, unsure of what to do. Lisa was sitting on the steps, still crying, though her sobs had become quieter, more controlled, like she was gearing up to make a scene if needed. Jake looked up and spotted me through the window. I stared back, feeling a mix of embarrassment and defiance. I wasn't about to open the door for another round of guilt-tripping. After a few seconds, he averted his eyes, as if he couldn't handle the confrontation either. He tried to console Lisa, who was now crying into his shoulder, but she pushed him away, still angry. I heard bits of their muffled conversation, mainly Lisa's bitter complaints. "I can't believe they did this to me, to our baby." Watching them from inside, I felt a strange, fleeting sense of relief, a weight lifting from my chest. It was like I could finally breathe again. The suffocating tension that had permeated our home for the past 2 months was gone, replaced by an odd kind of calm. But I also knew, deep down, that this feeling wouldn't last. Sure enough, the phone calls started barely an hour after Lisa and Jake had driven off. The first was from my mother-in-law, her voice high-pitched and furious. "How could you throw her out like that?" she demanded, not bothering with pleasantries. "She's pregnant, and you know she has nowhere to go." I tried to stay calm, explaining the situation as rationally as I could. "It wasn't just one thing," I said, my voice tired but steady. "She crossed too many lines, and we couldn't keep enabling her behavior. But my mother-in-law wasn't having it. So, you decided to put a pregnant woman on the street? What kind of people are you?" She shot back, her words sharp with anger. I felt my patience wearing thin, but I managed to keep my tone measured. "She is Jake," I said. "And she has your house, if you're so concerned. We've done everything we could." That seemed to catch her off guard for a moment, but she quickly recovered. "This isn't about us," she insisted. "This is about you showing no compassion." I finally had to hang up, unable to take any more of her accusations. The next call was from my father-in-law, but his approach was different. He tried the reasonable angle, telling me that I should have shown more empathy and understanding, especially considering Lisa's pregnancy. "It's hard enough being pregnant, let alone being alone," he added, as if I hadn't considered that. I told him the same thing I told my mother-in-law. We'd done everything we could, and Lisa had pushed us too far. He sighed heavily, clearly disappointed. "You'll regret this," he said before hanging up. Things escalated quickly from there. My in-laws, furious that their calls hadn't swayed me, decided to take it a step further. They went to my parents' house, trying to turn them against me. I got a call from my mom, sounding shocked and unsure of how to approach the topic. "They came by earlier," she said hesitantly. "They were very upset. Said you'd kicked Lisa out without warning." I felt a rush of anger, not just at my in-laws but at the situation itself. "Mom, they're twisting the story," I explained, frustration seeping into my voice. Lisa's behavior was out of control, and we had no choice. You know me, I wouldn't just throw someone out without a reason. To my relief, my parents stood by me, even if they didn't entirely agree with how I'd handled things. "We understand," my mom said quietly. "But maybe there could have been a different way." My husband, Dave, wasn't sure either. He tried to be supportive, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. One night, as we sat in the living room after putting Alex to bed, he finally brought it up. "Do you think you could have handled it differently?" he asked, his voice tentative. "I mean, I understand why you did it, but maybe there was a better way to make her understand." I felt a flash of anger, but also a deep sense of exhaustion. "Dave, I tried everything," I said, my voice raw. "I've tried talking to her, being patient, setting boundaries, but she didn't respect any of it. What else was I supposed to do?" He nodded slowly, seeming to understand, but there was still a hint of doubt in his eyes. "I know," he admitted, "but it's hard. She's my sister." I felt a pang of sympathy for him. It wasn't easy for Dave, caught between his wife and his sister, each demanding his loyalty in different ways. "I get it," I said softly, reaching for his hand. "But I have to protect our home, too." Despite the rift it had caused with my in-laws, I couldn't bring myself to apologize. I knew that doing so would mean invalidating everything I had endured over the past 2 months. I wasn't just dealing with a difficult houseguest. I was dealing with someone who had disrespected me, my family, and the boundaries of my home. I wasn't going to apologize for protecting that. But as the days passed, the fallout only grew messier. My in-laws continued their campaign against me, reaching out to other relatives and painting me as the villain who had heartlessly kicked out a vulnerable pregnant woman. I found myself blocked by a few family members on social media, their silent judgments louder than any words. The situation had put a clear divide in the family, and there was no going back. Dave and I tried to focus on moving forward, but it was hard to ignore the nagging feeling that this rift would never truly heal. We were left to wonder whether we had made the right choice, or if we'd just traded one kind of chaos for another. The calls didn't stop, even after the dramatic exit. My in-laws seemed determined to wear me down, convinced that I'd break and offer an apology. At first, I tried to reason with them, but it quickly became clear they were more interested in making me feel guilty than actually understanding the situation. Every conversation followed the same script. She's pregnant. You're supposed to be family. This isn't how we treat each other. One morning, my phone rang again. My mother-in-law, of course. When are you going to apologize to Lisa? She asked, her tone icy. I took a deep breath. I'm not going to apologize for setting boundaries in my own home, I replied firmly. Her response was a bitter laugh. Boundaries? You're just being cruel. You're letting her suffer out there, all alone. The accusation hit hard, but I refused to let it get to me. She has you, doesn't she? I shot back, my patience wearing thin. She has Jake. She's not alone. But my mother-in-law wouldn't let up. If you had a heart, you'd at least try to make things right, she insisted. The frustration and exhaustion had finally reached a breaking point, and before I could even think about it, I found myself saying, you know what? I think I'm done with this conversation. Then I hung up. The guilt-tripping didn't end with phone calls, though. I started getting passive-aggressive texts from my sister-in-law's number. I hope you're sleeping well, one of them read. Some of us can't sleep, wondering where our next meal will come from. It was signed off with a crying emoji, as if that somehow added emotional weight. Another message arrived the next day. Still think you're a good person? The constant barrage was exhausting, mentally and emotionally. I felt like I was being boxed in, expected to feel sorry for finally defending myself. After a few days of this nonsense, I made a decision. I blocked my in-laws' numbers. It felt drastic, even a little petty, but it was the only way to protect my sanity. If they wanted to see me as the villain, then so be it. I was done letting them dictate how I felt. A few days later, Jake showed up at our house to collect the rest of Lisa's things. I wasn't sure what to expect. Another round of guilt-tripping, maybe? But when I opened the door, he just looked tired. Dark circles had formed under his eyes, and his shoulders were slumped. He stood there awkwardly for a moment before mumbling, I'm here for Lisa's stuff. I nodded and stepped aside. It's in the garage, I said, trying to keep my tone neutral. We walked there in silence, the tension palpable. As he started loading up the boxes, he glanced at me with a defeated expression. I'm sorry about everything, he muttered. I didn't expect things to turn out like this. I wasn't sure what to say. Part of me wanted to unload everything. The frustration, the stress, the sheer exhaustion of the past few months. But I knew it wouldn't change anything. Me too, I finally managed, though I wasn't sure if I meant it. Jake just nodded, looking relieved that I hadn't lashed out. After he'd loaded the last box, he turned to me again. If it helps, she's staying with her parents now, he said quietly. I don't think she'll be bothering you anymore. I just nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and lingering resentment. Jake offered a half-hearted, take care, before getting back in his car and driving away. As I watched him leave, I realized that this chapter of our lives was finally over. But the sense of finality came with an unexpected heaviness, too. I had imagined feeling victorious, maybe even triumphant, but instead, I felt drained, like I had fought a battle only to win a hollow victory. When Dave came home that evening, I told him about the visit. He listened quietly, his face unreadable. So, that's it, he asked, as if he couldn't quite believe it. I shrugged. Yeah, I guess that's it. We sat down in the living room, both of us feeling the weight of what had just transpired. I know it's been tough, Dave finally said, his voice soft. And I know it wasn't easy for you, but I think you did the right thing. I looked at him, trying to gauge whether he really meant it. Even if it means cutting ties? I asked. He hesitated for a moment, but then nodded. If that's what it takes for us to have peace, then yes. I'd rather have a smaller family that respects each other than a bigger one filled with constant drama. His words brought me some comfort, but they also made the reality of our decision hit harder. We were truly drawing a line in the sand, deciding to distance ourselves from people who had been a big part of our lives. It hurts, I admitted, tears welling up in my eyes. But I can't keep trying to make everyone happy at my own expense. Dave pulled me into a hug, his voice steady. "We'll get through this," he said. "We just need to focus on us for now." It was the first time in weeks that I felt a real sense of hope. The chaos had left scars, but maybe, just maybe, we could start healing. I knew it wouldn't be easy, and I knew the in-laws weren't going to forgive us anytime soon. But I also knew that I couldn't apologize for protecting my family's peace, even if it meant becoming the bad guy in someone else's story. It's been a few weeks since Lisa left, and our house feels different now. Quieter, calmer, almost like it's settling back into itself. There's no more tension-filled mornings, no surprise tantrums over missing almond milk or the wrong brand of cereal. I can leave groceries in the fridge without wondering if they'll be there the next day. But even with the newfound peace, there's still an undercurrent of tension in the air, lingering like the stale aftermath of a storm. It's not as loud as before, but it's there, humming beneath the surface. Dave seems to be handling the situation better than I expected, but I've caught him more than once flipping through old photo albums. There's this look on his face, a mix of sadness and acceptance, as if he's trying to reconcile the warm memories with the bitter reality of what happened. I know he misses the closeness we used to have with his family. I miss it too, if I'm honest. But every time I think about letting them back in, I remember how much chaos they brought with them, how quickly things spiraled out of control. One evening, after we put Alex to bed, I found Dave sitting on the couch, staring at a family picture from last Christmas. Lisa was in it, smiling, her arm around Dave's shoulders. It was hard to believe that the girl in the photo, the one who had once been sweet and carefree, was the same person who'd caused so much turmoil in our home. I sat down next to him, unsure of what to say. "Do you regret it?" I finally asked, my voice quiet. He looked at me, his expression conflicted. "I don't regret standing by you," he said slowly. "But I regret that it had to come to this. I never wanted things to get so broken." His words hit hard because they were true. We hadn't just cut off Lisa. We created a rift that affected the entire family. It felt like we'd won a battle, but lost something deeper, something that might never fully heal. I nodded, feeling tears prick at my eyes. I didn't want it to be like this either, I admitted. But I couldn't let it keep going. We've started seeing a therapist to help us process everything, to make sense of the fallout that seems to have left more scars than we expected. The sessions are tough. There's a lot to unpack, from the guilt and anger to the lingering doubts about whether we did the right thing. But it's helping slowly. I'm learning that setting boundaries doesn't make me a bad person, even if it feels that way sometimes. Dave is working through his own mix of emotions, trying to find balance between his loyalty to his family and his need to protect his own home. The therapist suggested we write letters to Lisa, not to send, but as a way of releasing some of the bottled-up feelings. At first, it felt awkward, like trying to speak to someone who wasn't really there. But once I started writing, the words poured out: anger, sadness, disappointment, and even a strange sense of pity. I told her how much she had hurt us, but also how much I hoped she could find her way again. Through the grapevine, I've heard bits and pieces about what's happened to Lisa since she left. She moved back in with her parents, apparently after a brief falling out with Jake. No modeling career, no steady boyfriend, just a messy, unresolved situation. I try not to let it affect me, but it's hard to shake off the feeling that maybe, in some way, we failed her too. The funny thing is, despite everything, I don't wish her ill. I want her to be okay, to figure things out, and maybe even grow from this mess. But I've also learned that sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself and for others is to let people go, to step back and let them find their own way, however painful that might be. One afternoon, as I was tidying up the living room, I found one of Lisa's magazines tucked under the couch. It was an old issue of a fashion magazine, its pages dog-eared and worn. I flipped through it absent-mindedly, seeing the models she had admired and aspired to be like. It felt like a relic from a different life, a reminder of what could have been if things hadn't taken such a dark turn. I put the magazine in the trash, feeling a strange mix of closure and lingering sadness. It was symbolic, maybe, throwing away a piece of the past that had weighed on us for far too long. As I closed the lid on the trash can, I felt a quiet kind of resolve settle in. We might not be able to fix what's broken with Lisa and the rest of the family, but we could at least start focusing on our own healing. In the evenings, when the house is quiet and Alex is asleep, Dave and I sit on the porch, watching the sunset, and talking about anything but family drama. It's not a perfect solution, but it's a start. We're learning to be okay with the scars that remain, even if they're not entirely healed yet. And maybe that's all we can do. Accept the mess, learn from it, and move forward one small step at a time. The past few months have taught me that setting boundaries doesn't mean you won't get hurt. It just means you're willing to protect yourself even if it costs you something in the process. And for now, that's enough.